Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the worst choice.
See? Lots of big blue. Like a big
All right.
black guy.
We're all here that's going to be here tonight. Ms. Stanley is still out, and Ms. Shamro, if you're watching, we hope you get well soon. Thank you. I'd like to start this meeting tonight with acknowledging that the land on which we are gathered is the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting this land and inspiring us to uphold our responsibilities to do the same. May our time together and our interaction together be undertaken with respect, dignity, and patience and charity for all. So with that, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Ms. Walker, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Yes, good evening, Commissioner Walter.
Here.
Commissioner Werner. Here. I should say short timer, Commissioner Walter, right? Mayor Pro Tem Shamro is absent. Commissioner Wilson.
Here.
And Commissioner Stanley is absent. Commissioner Treadwell.
Present.
And Mayor Lewis.
Here. Okay. Before we get started, so everyone knows, this is our annual organizational meeting first. There'll be a couple of items that we'll take action on. After that, we'll adjourn this meeting, and then we'll get into our study session. So if those are at home that are watching, so what are y'all doing? So, okay, with that, announcements from the city manager, please.
At this time, we're starting deer season tomorrow. I think that's worthy of mentioning. And then,
That's famous.
yes, and just wanted to say congratulations to Commissioner Walter in regard to representing the city of Traverse City and then the larger district within the county. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. Announcements from the city clerk.
Yes, just a few meetings to announce for this week, the week of November 13th. The Arts Commission will meet. That'll be on Wednesday, November 16th at 3:30 p.m. in the committee room, which is on the second floor of the Governmental Center. The Brown Bridge Advisory Board will meet on Thursday, November 17th at 5:15 p.m. in the training room on the second floor of the Governmental Center. And finally, with respect to meetings, the Downtown Development Authority Board of Trustees will meet this Friday, November 18th at 8:30 a.m. in the Commission Chambers. We're currently recruiting folks to step up and serve in volunteer capacities on different city boards and committees. Those include the Local Officers Compensation Commission, Downtown Development Authority Board, and the Brown Bridge Advisory Committee. Anyone interested in serving, as always, is encouraged to contact the city clerk's office. I've got just a few general announcements. The city's Master Plan and Mobility Action Plan initiative has launched the second online survey, and that's now open. That's open now through November 20th, and the survey can be found on the city's homepage, which is at traversitymi.gov. Also, Traverse City Light and Power has begun their Climate Action Plan initiative, and they have an online survey as well, and that's at tclpcap.org, tclpcap.org. And also, Traverse City Light and Power will be hosting their second open house on the Climate Action Plan tomorrow, which is November
Thought it was Wednesday.
Wednesday, excuse me, I'm seeing that now. Wednesday, November 16th from 4 to 6 p.m. at the library's main branch on Woodmere Avenue. And then, of course, last Tuesday we had an election, and the city experienced a 67% voter turnout. And I just want to thank all of the election workers and the folks on my team that helped power democracy. We had a record-setting number of folks voting absentee for a midterm election, and also robust turnout at the polls. And lastly, I just want to remind everyone sitting up here to speak into your microphone so everyone can hear you. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our first item for consideration is appointment of two members of this body to serve on the Planning Commission. Currently, Commissioner Treadwell and Commissioner Wilson has served for the last year. I'm hoping that they would be honored to be able to continue for one more year. Oh, I'm glad to see you want to do that. Thank you. Yes. Yes.
I'm actually not opposed to opening it up for any other commissioner's consideration, but there's a couple not here, so I didn't want to put it out there on them, and/or there's going to be a vacancy that, I don't know what the process is for filling the seat on the city commission, but if it could be waited for that person's consideration.
It's up to you, sir, but you've been this far into it, and you're right into the middle of getting ready to help with a master plan, and I would prefer to see you continuing that.
But I appreciated being fleeced into it last year, but but I don't know if I'm the most effective person for that commission.
Okay. Yes?
Well, I guess I'll look over to the city clerk. Could I make a motion to appoint or reappoint Commissioner Treadwell and have Commissioner Wilson continue until January?
Well, if
And
his
then
seat,
reconsideration?
if his seat isn't filled, so to answer your question, you could make a motion just to reappoint Commissioner Treadwell, and then Commissioner Wilson, if willing, can continue serving without a motion to reappoint him until his seat is, until someone's appointed to his seat. So that's one way that you could do that.
Yeah, I'm not miserable with the role or anything. I'm
Right.
fine with continuing if
That's
needed,
fair.
but.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
then I will make a motion that Commissioner Treadwell be appointed to a one-year term expiring November 13th, 2023 on the City Planning Commission.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment out there? Because we're going to, well, we weren't going to listen to it anyway, because you're getting it. So there you go. And what we'll do is on the other seat, after we have a full commission, after the first year, we'll take the question up at that time. Fair enough? Okay. And if you'll help remind us of that, thank you.
Absolutely.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay. We have two appointments for the Planning Commission. As we know, Mitch, Commissioner Treadwell and I met as an ad hoc committee. Ms. Stanley was out of town, but we continue to meet, and our recommendation at this point is to reappoint David Hassing for another term and to appoint David Knapp for a term. Both of them we felt out of the four we interviewed would do an excellent job for us moving forward. So, and I think their resumes are in your packet. So, we're really, but both Davids, but Mr. Hassing has been there for quite some time, so he knows the ropes and what we're going through. Mr. Knapp is a recent resident of our community, and with a family, he serves. I think he'll go a long way in helping us to look at another sector, i.e., those with family. It's not that he doesn't have background in it, as you saw from his education. So with that, I'll be glad to entertain a motion. Okay.
I'll make a motion that David Hassing and David Knapp are appointed to the terms expiring November 10th, 2025, seats previously held by David Hassing and Janet Fleshman, as recommended by the ad hoc committee consisting of Mayor Lewis, Commissioner Stanley, and Commissioner Treadwell.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion, support. Any questions from the audience? All those in favor of the audience say, all those in favor of the, well, we're in favor of the audience. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. This next one's a bittersweet moment. We need to, first of all, accept the resignation of Commissioner Ashley Walter. There's not a motion here, but to accept the resignation of Commissioner Walter as of December the 31st at 11:59 p.m. Yeah, I'm going to make you stay here till the very end. So there you go. That's a recommended motion. Who wants to make that? Oh, you're not going to get to leave. How about that? You want to make the motion, ma'am?
Do I want to?
Oh, you want to stay?
Is she allowed to make the motion?
Yeah, go ahead and make the motion, Mark.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Is that-
And I'll support it.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion is accepted. Now the other part on the process to fill that seat, and I'm going to turn this over to you, sir.
Sure. So I'll also echo what's been said. I just want to congratulate you, Commissioner Walter, on your election to the county board, and we'll miss you here on the city commission. I know you're not leaving until the end of December, and we'll have more on that and plan a little celebration for you at a meeting, one of your last meetings, perhaps. But with that, I'll just walk through some of the options that the commission has. So just to share some information that's in this memo, but just I want to make sure it's out there for those listening in, that Commissioner Walter's seat on the City Commission expires November of next year, so November 13th of 2023. So there's just basically a year left to that seat. The City Commission has a couple of options under the city charter on how you can go about having that seat filled. One is to appoint someone to serve the remainder of the term. The other would be to schedule a special election in May to have essentially the last, what would be at that point, the last 6 months of that seat filled. Or you could do a hybrid if you wanted. So you could appoint someone to serve until the election in May, and then have the election decide who serves those last 6 months of the seat. It's my recommendation that you fill, because of the fact that holding an election would result in simply someone filling that seat for 6 months, and then you might have two people ramping up to serve for that essentially last year that's remaining. I recommend that the City Commission appoint someone to fill the balance of the term. And so if that's the decision of the City Commission, I outlined some options for the Commission's consideration.
Let's take that one first. I think in the past, our tradition of the city has been to fill the vacancies until the next regular election of the City Commission. I would recommend we continue that tradition. It has served us well. So unless there's objections, by a nod of the heads, we'll just say that's how we're going to proceed.
Okay, and I will just for the record share that Mayor Pro Tem Shamrow and Commissioner Stanley also were in support of appointing someone for the whole term.
Okay, so with that, that's how we will proceed. Now, here's different ways that we're going to do this. First of all, we're going to get applications.
Yes. Yeah, we hopefully will get a lot of applications, and I'll talk through just a few of the items, and some of these are decision points for the commission, but the recommendation is to invite those who are interested to submit a letter of interest to my office, which would have to be received electronically or in person by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, November 30th. And then within the letter, those who are interested would be asked to articulate why they desire to serve on the City Commission and to articulate why they believe they'd contribute meaningfully. Those are items that we would ask them to share specifically. And then they can share any other information that they think is relevant for the City Commission, the public, as these folks are considered. And then what we'll do is we'll work with the commission to identify a date for interviews. If there's less than 12 candidates, just thinking about the amount of time it takes to conduct these interviews, if there's 12 or less, I should say, it's our recommendation that those interviews all be done on one evening. I do want to point out that we've got some planned absences from the commission that's going to make it a little bit challenging to do these interviews in December. There's a few days in the middle of December that might work for everyone, so we'll aim for that. But with that, that's essentially how that would work up to that point. And then the commission doesn't have to decide this tonight, but you could conduct the interviews in different ways. I know Commissioner Stanley and Mayor Pro Tem Shamrow suggested that, and it seems like a very workable way to go about it, is to have the candidates interview one at a time in front of the City Commission. So in the past, you've had essentially all of them lined up, and we rotated the order that they answered questions first and that sort of thing. I think it's advantageous to do them individually. They'd be teed up sort of and queued up outside of the room. We can't prevent them from being in here, but it would be requested that they not listen in on the interviews. And then doing them one at a time sort of allows, hopefully, for some more originality of thought. There might be less repetition in the answers. And also the person's just, I'm saying that because they wouldn't be hearing what the others had said before them. So that could be done that way. And then when it comes to narrowing down or selecting the candidate, in the past, the commission has taken a number of points, like you've had a maximum of, say, 10 points to award to candidates however you wanted. So in the past, you might have given all 10 points to one candidate that you felt really strongly about, or you might have spread your points among candidates. And that can, and has resulted in just a couple of commissioners sort of tipping the scales, in meaning that there wasn't, the selection didn't necessarily result, and I'll take this on my shoulders because it was the process I recommended in the past, but it didn't necessarily allow for the candidate with the widest amount, broadest amount of support to be chosen. So I'm recommending, if it comes down to this, you might just decide that there's one person that's the clear front runner, but you could use ranked choice voting, which is a method of selecting a candidate or narrowing down such that you rank people based 1, 2, 3, 4. You assign a rank, giving your highest preference down to your lowest preference, and ultimately the candidate or candidates with the widest support rise to the top. And we have a portal that does that calculation for you. So that's I think, a really good way for selecting candidates if there's not a clear top choice. And ultimately, using ranked choice voting doesn't mean you have to pick who rose to the top. Using that, it could serve as a basis for the beginning of your deliberation. So I'm kind of putting a lot out there, but that's an idea or an approach for filling the seat.
Well, there's also, as you mentioned, is in there, if we feel like that or pins out there, we can put out a motion and for different candidates, and whoever gets the majority in one on that, there's different ways, and I think we can follow up on that as we get closer to it. And first of all, we got to see how many folks apply. If we have more than 12, we may have to go through a 2-cycle type of thing to whereby we need to eliminate it down to a certain number. I don't know, so we'll figure it out.
I think for tonight, what would be helpful to know is if the commission is good with the deadline for the resumes, the application, if there's other information you'd like them to provide in the letter. I outlined what we'd ask for them to share, but is there something else you want to make sure everyone covers when they submit their letter? So those are 2 initial questions.
I believe the date's fair enough, so I think we can go with that. Is trying to get that little window somewhere in December. You may want to make sure the candidates know that it is our goal to interview between this date and this date, so they got to let us know if they're available.
Absolutely.
That may mean the week between Christmas and New Year, I don't know. So, because I do know that there's other folks that'll be gone for the first couple weeks in January, so we have this window. And it's not been very often that we've also had a sitting commissioner who's leaving us to be involved, but I think I'll leave that to Ms. Walter, whether she wants to be involved or not be involved. That is your call to make. So I don't see any reason why they couldn't.
Nope.
But if you feel awkward about it, it's your call to make. So I'd be glad to have you. So for one, so I don't recall when we up.
I think this is a first, maybe.
Yeah, it will be. So there you go. Okay, there you go.
Just a question. I understand these can be hard to predict, and there's a lot of variability between one cycle and another. But in the past, how many applicants has there been for something like this?
Typically, somewhere between 10 and 15. You usually get quite a number.
Yeah.
You had mentioned the requirements for application. Are those on top of the regular, like when somebody applies for a board, the same kind of info sheet? Is that part of it, where they would have like a resume and then the same kind of questions that we get for that?
It's very, very similar.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Seems fair. I don't know that there's anything else.
Any other questions?
Well, at what point would it be decided how the new person would be chosen? I'm just thinking if someone is interested in applying, they may want to know the process.
Well, that's fair, of course. I mean, ultimately, the decision will lie with the city commission. It takes 4 votes to appoint someone to this seat. We could agree on a process tonight if you want, but otherwise what we'd share with candidates is it's a public interview process, and then the deliberation will occur in public too.
Yeah, that's in the date that we would like to strive to get the first interview in, but between now and by the time we get all the candidates, I mean, that's something that Benjamin will have to work to pick a date that we all know that we can be together and to do
Yeah,
the
just-
interviews, so.
To put it out there, I'm thinking that it's going to be either, it'd be sometime between December 14th and December 23rd. We'll have to check with all of you unless you're prepared now to say what works, but otherwise we'll follow up offline and we'll make that very well known what we're looking at.
And so by the 23rd, if we do it December the 14th and the 23rd, didn't you have something in your memo about the 19th of December?
I did, and that was, I mean, it's all sort of contingent on what we go with, but December 19th was the date that I thought that the commission could meet to further narrow down candidates if you got more than 12 or discuss it.
But we will know how many we have when we meet on the 5th, will we not? Then we can make that decision too, so, right? Correct?
Yes, I heard you. I was just, I
Oh,
know
okay.
there was a reason why I put December 19th in there, and I hope that it would be better thought out than what I just said, but maybe not.
Was it so that all of us are, is there a meeting on the 12th?
Oh, I know what it is.
Yes.
Are-
Oh,
come-
it's because
you'll
we
be back
wouldn't,
when?
I
We-
fly home on the 11th. I'll be home late. I'd probably be severely jet lagged, but if it makes it easier, I can make sure that I'm here on the 12th.
and actually, that is why I put the 19th,
That's
was
right.
thinking about absences that we knew
You
about.
guys are patient enough with me being gone for a few weeks.
Yeah, I think the 19th is our only regular meeting with all 7 of us before the end of the year.
Okay. Well, I knew that, but it's also going to be a business meeting too, so that's when we have our regular meeting, so.
I mean,
think
really,
if we
this,
stick with, so, we'll work it through, okay.
And we can reevaluate if, say, we get 25 applicants.
Well,
we'll
that's a-
know
that's a
that
whole
by
different
December
ballgame.
5th, so.
Okay, that's true. That would be another historical mark, so, okay.
yes, it would.
Yes, it would.
Can I make one comment?
Yes, please.
To the final decision, I guess, and yes, we will have to have a motion and a second and a vote that gets at least 4 affirmative. But as far as using ranked choice, especially if there are multiple highly qualified applicants, which there very well likely will be, I like the idea of the ranked choice approach because sometimes it's very hard to make that decision A or B or C or D. Whereas if there's one candidate that clearly rises above all the rest, it's easier to forego the ranked choice and just have the motion and do that.
I'm not closing any of the avenues. I'm saying that when we see how many are in there, and maybe we can have if Mark's okay with it, we can have a small discussion on the 5th. Okay, we're going to go this, but here we'll do the ranked choice, but it depends on how many we get. We may need to have the first meeting just to weed it down to a number that we can do work with. So that's kind of where we are, I'm hoping. So we may have to plan for the 12th, and Mark, if you can trust us to get us through a system, I know you'll do your best, so, but we'll keep it open. I'm open to all avenues. It just depends on how many folks we get. But
That's
I
a big
like
question mark, yeah.
I like the ranked choice, that idea. It may help us if you give us a dummy test the first time, just make up 7 names.
Sure.
Okay, I see 7 names, and we can try it out, see how it works out.
We can even email you a sample election where you can just
Okay,
try it out,
yeah.
because you're going to do this all from your iPad, and it's,
Or computer.
yeah, your mobile device,
Okay,
whatever
thank
that
you.
is, yeah.
Well, I just want to I'll have to bring an iPad in.
Yeah.
That's what I'm All right, that's good. All right. Does that sound fair enough? I think we got a game plan.
All right, great. Thank
Are
you.
you okay?
I am
At least
okay.
Until
Yeah.
we look and see what the field looks like.
Uh-huh, that's what it is, okay. Well, we would encourage those out there that are listening to please, if you have an interest, to please submit your interest, your letter of interest and your background, but get a hold of the city clerk if you have any particular questions. Looked at somewhere between, let's just say the 14th, and you said the 23rd, let's say the 22nd, okay? Let's just say
Okay.
I'm not meeting on a Friday night. I prefer not to. On the
That sounds
14th,
great.
on the 22nd, we will hopefully, 7 of us will get together. We'll have the interviews, and we'll see how it all works out. So, comes out the end. Okay. Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
don't need any other action, just acknowledgement and consensus that we're okay with this.
Just acknowledgement and consensus, and then we'll follow up on the other items, including asking all the commissioners to submit their questions, which will be held confidential and all that. But we'll follow up with you offline on that.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
And what would the estimated deadline for those questions be?
Oh, probably somewhere around the
Down to 30th.
10th of December or so.
Okay, all right, cool. I would make it the 9th, you won't, the 10th is a Saturday, so just, okay, very
Yeah.
good. All right,
He asked for a ballpark.
okay, okay, very good. Thank you very much. All right, with that, we'll go to public comment. We will have a public comment time right after that we get in our study session, so. Okay, seeing none, unless we have any other questions, I'm going to call, yes.
The other question that comes up from time to time, because the city does things a little differently than other entities, is that person would be sworn in right away? Or at the next meeting? How does
My-
that work with,
They could be sworn in right away. I thought it'd be nicer to swear them in at their first meeting, because then they could have people there that might want to join them for the oath, you know?
so if I'm technically serving through the end of the year, how does that work?
We can swear them in with a retro or a prospective date.
Or you could swear them in, because our next meeting, our meeting wouldn't be until Tuesday, January the 3rd.
Yeah, but if you moved quicker than that, I think is what Commissioner
Yeah.
Walter is thinking of.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. All right, with that, when you have any other questions, we will adjourn the organizational meeting, and we'll get to the study session. Our first topic under the study session is an update on the Transportation and Demand Management Report, and I'm going to turn this over to Marty and/or Gene, whoever, or Nicole.
Well, thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Commissioners. Back in 2017, a Transportation Demand Management Report was put together. And this year, as you recall, through the budget process, the CEO, DDA Director, CEO, excuse me, Gene Gerenzi is here this evening, as well as our Transportation Mobility Director, Nicole Van Ness, to give you an update of this study. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Gene.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Jean Dorenzi, CEO of the Traverse City Downtown Development Authority. And as Marty indicated, the 2017 Transportation Demand Management Plan, or known as TDM, was initiated in 2017. And as part of that plan, it identified that we needed to refresh that plan on a regular basis, particularly if there's changes within our community. And we identified this as needed really through the lens of the post-pandemic, as well as we work on the corridors and include additional high demand within those corridors. It's not just about the downtown districts, but about the city of Traverse City as a whole, that we really needed to look at different opportunities for the city of Traverse City as a whole. In the plan that's in your packet, you have quick wins, you have short-term, and you have long-term. And when you look at those quick wins, it's not necessarily because it's easy. Every implementation, there's a cause and effect. And it's really important to look at opportunities for communication as well as partnerships, and that partnership is with the city, the DDA, Beta, and private development. It's really a multifaceted opportunity to make some implementation steps. Nicole will look at all of those quick wins, short-term, long-term, and identify how the DDA and the city will be working on strategies for implementation. We being the DDA and the city, do not look at the plan as a stale plan, but a plan that we can implement. And I'm really proud of what we have done since 2017 on some of the implementation pieces and what we can do for the future. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nicole.
Good evening, Commissioners. Nicole Vanez, Transportation Demand Management, Transportation Mobility Director. Sorry, I was reading here from my script. Let's see. All right, so this is the PDF that is in your packet. So I'm going to go through the updates that were provided by Nelson Nygaard. As Jean had mentioned, we did a transportation demand management TDM study back in 2017. So at the time, for commissioners that were not on the commission at that time, we did have a lot of parking woes. Many would tell you that it was difficult to find a spot. We had a lot of archaic practices and processes that we were utilizing. Basically, we were just absorbing whatever happened. New developments that were looking for parking, we really had no, a plan or considerations in regards to how we would meet the needs for the businesses. So we decided to do a TDM study, and the main reason is that a lot of people always talk about parking studies, more and more parking, and so we felt as though the need for the TDM really incorporated other initiatives that would help us meet the demands for both parking and transportation. Small percentages in parking really make a difference because we can't have one parking space per one person. So if we can get 2%, 4% to take alternate means, it really kind of helps the give and take of parking spaces and also makes utilization better. So with that, we began to implement the study after it was published. It was very difficult to make changes within a reasonable time frame and also see the difference. The pandemic helped to accelerate a lot of the processes that we implemented, mostly because when everybody went to work from home, we were able to implement changes fairly quickly. That way, when they came back to work, it was kind of a new way of processing. So that really helped us out. In that first couple years, we were able to discontinue buy in bulk discounts. So before, we used to give discounts if you purchased quarterly or annually. What that did is ended up making the financial burden more expensive for the hourly employee, which is really a lot of the retail workers or restaurant workers. We decoupled surface and garage permits, so you no longer were able to use your garage permit and surface, which was also helping us or keeping us from being able to understand true utilization or true occupancy, because when garage permits were using surface and then throwing surface into overflow locations, it was really hard to know who was parking where. We also created seasonal meter and garage rates, so that has helped because we know that traditionally we see a peak of tourism or influx of vacation homes in the summer and locals in the winter, so we've really adjusted those rates based on utilization or demand. And we've also created zone-based pricing. So we know that traditionally Front Street has been where everybody wants to be, where the Rockstar parking should be, and then we know that Old Town, while there are businesses thriving in that area, has traditionally been an area where there have been lower demands. So those are some of the quick wins that we tackled in the first couple of years. We also took a step further and began to look at our transportation and mobility amenities. We, for the first time, have created budgeted and line items in our budget for allocating parking funds towards transit or amenities. We've contributed to the Bay Area Transportation's Bayline route. So that's the free east-west route. They were looking for partners, and we contributed to that piece. We've also implemented a Destination Downtown program, which provides free bus passes for employees of businesses within the DDA district. Again, we're looking for small percentages of change in order to free up spaces. We've purchased bus shelters. Part of expecting people to wait for transit or wait for a bus also includes that they're comfortable in all weather conditions, so shade as well as rain. We've manufactured internally to save money and erected our own bike shelters. We purchased more bike fix-it stations and had them installed throughout downtown. And we've also increased our in-street and on-sidewalk bike racks. So within the new report, after we looked at everything that we had accomplished, it was time to, at the 5-year mark, consider a revision. And so with the post-pandemic or coming out of the pandemic, it's really important that we evaluate any new conditions that the consultants might have seen around other communities that we might be able to incorporate, especially as we're waiting for employees to come back downtown and also continue supporting the businesses. So with that, the 2017 recommendations still apply, so nothing has changed. So this might seem like a light report, but we are also cross-referencing that report, so those still apply. With that, the first item is the flex loading zones. So some of you may be familiar with Central United Methodist Church on Cass Street. They have 3 loading zones. On the north side of the alley, there are an additional 2 loading zones. In front of the post office, there are 8 loading zones. Depending on what project you have, the project may get 3 loading zones or other areas around each development. So with knowing that there's redevelopment planned for various vacant lots throughout downtown, it's important that we utilize the current flex loading zones as well as what considerations may be made for new developments. And so with the existing ones, there's an opportunity to define when loading is appropriate and also when we can turn those spaces over to regular short-term parking for retail or for restaurants. So that is something that we started right before the pandemic, and then we put it on pause. And now that we are able to reevaluate and kind of understand the new business hours downtown, we'll be picking that back up. That will include a partnership with the traffic committee as well as the planning department in order to make sure that we are considering all various uses of businesses. The next item is the expanded employee parking options. So this one, we actually took action at the DDA board meeting last month, knowing that this recommendation would be coming forward. We'd been tracking utilization at the Old Town parking facility. We know that the walkability in Old Town is there. It's a pleasant walk from Old Town to downtown. And we're also looking at ways that we can provide parking for employees by shifting them to areas that there's availability. So with that, one of the biggest things that we hear about is accessibility, the safety of sidewalks as it relates to snow removal. So we'll be focusing on ways to expand that piece. The other piece that's really important is we talk about our parking problem, which really is more of a walking problem. And so by incentivizing employees through a lower rate to park at the Old Town facility, hopefully we're beginning to change or adapt to a better behavior that includes more walking options. This will help to meet the needs as we begin closing lots. For instance, that homestretch project that is planned for Lot O. The more that we can get employees to adapt to this new way of parking and walking, will hopefully alleviate some of those issues with G or even Lot A with the Boardman River closing. So we'll continue to provide reduced price permits as availability is there, and also capture information that we can related to the accessibility to make sure that that's a safe walk from Old Town to downtown. We also are looking at varying monthly permits by season. And so with that, basically you would charge a higher rate when walking or conditions are better. So in the summertime, you'd charge a higher rate, whereas in the winter, when the conditions may be less, you charge a lower rate. So this is one of the items that we will be looking at. The consultant put this as a quick win for us. We need to consider this maybe past the first 2 years. Currently, we allow employees to purchase permits for up to 12 months. So one of the first things we'd have to do in also making this change is make our permits strictly month to month. And that will allow us to change the rate seasonally, from October to November, January to February, depending on what those conditions are. It will also mean that we'll need to collect data as it relates to the current conditions. Again, our snow and ice is something that we focus on, we hear a lot about, and so we need to make sure that we can make those conditions safe for those that will be walking from that location. We also are considering a digital validation program. This will mean that retail restaurants will also buy into the validation program to pay for parking for their clients and customers. Currently, we do offer validations, but they're only for parking in the garages. This would expand validations to the multi-space meters as well as the on-street parking. So it's a way for retailers and restaurants to, add an extra perk to shopping or dining at their business. And then continuing to update the performance-based parking approach that was approved by both the DDA board and the city commission. This is the approach that gives us the flexibility to increase, decrease, monitor occupancy, and make some changes. So we are currently actively updating it as much as we can within the means of understanding the businesses and the requirements of downtown. We've also spent more time emphasizing mobility amenities, so that's something that we'll continue to do. We've partnered with Beta, that's our bus shelter program that we had. Now that we have installed bus shelters throughout the downtown area, we're going to be looking at other areas that might be right off of downtown, as those employees could potentially pick up stops just off of downtown for park and ride. Utilize the Destination Downtown program, the free bus passes to get into downtown. So the less congestion that we have downtown is less of the single occupancy vehicle emissions that will also be downtown. So we're hoping that more people will get to a stop and be able to come downtown without causing added congestion or pollution. I'm going to skip to page 12 and come back to page 8. So in our short term, any questions on the quick wins? Yes.
I've got a couple, maybe this is going to be covered later though, Nicole. Just a question on the Destination Downtown numbers. I know it's hard to see a trend with the pandemic and not as many people working downtown right now, but how has that gone? I don't hear that much about people taking advantage of it, but that's very anecdotal. And I'm curious to see your perspective on how that has gone, if some employees have embraced it and really, or employers, and can be ambassadors for that, or what it looks like to you going forward.
Yes, thank you. So we are really kind of surprised that we do not have more participants. We're offering free transportation. I think the largest part of the reason why the program is struggling is that Beta does not have real-time trackers. That's a part of their master plan. It's also part of their technology improvements. So we're really hoping that once that is available and online in the next 18 months, that's something that will attract other users. But I think that, we're very much a group that we're busy. We've got kids, we've got, other commitments, and it's hard to not know if you've missed the bus, if the bus is coming. So right now, utilization of that program is low. We do, we continue to support it, and we will continue to support it because we think that overall it is a big piece of our overall puzzle downtown. But I think that some of that is going to need to be increased once the real-time tracking comes online. And they are currently working on that with their technology improvements. So it's low, but we are hoping to continue to grow it.
Is that the biggest area of feedback you get is about the the timing and understanding of when the next bus is going to come and how that might play into their commute?
The other two factors is that other commitments. So again, if you've got children, if you get called to pick up your kid from school, or if you share a vehicle with your spouse or significant other, it's hard to know being able to make those arrangements. And then the other, hold on, now I just lost my train of thought.
I know that problem.
I looked up and I read the implementation and completely got sidetracked.
I know that problem.
There's another reason. It's mostly it's the convenience, the timing, the routes, some of their schedules. Asking people to wait if the bus is every half an hour. Many of us, if we're commuting in from Silver Lake or Acme, the drive from those locations is 15 minutes. So to add another, 15 to a half an hour if you've missed the bus, it's a convenience factor. With the Beta master plan, they're looking at potentially adding a north-south Bayline route, which would also increase frequency. That route is every 15 minutes. And so that would help with some of that. The other piece is just the designated locations for park and ride. So there's some other factors, but mostly it comes down to inconvenience.
And I guess going off of that, do you see the encouraging employee parking in the decks, which is slightly farther away than maybe they're used to parking now, as an incremental way to decrease the perceived convenience of parking and thus hopefully make people see bus or walking or biking when that is a favorable option as something that can be more comparable?
Yeah, so I think that initially, everyone is for some reason restricted to parking in the deck or feel as though it's not something that will work for them. But I feel as though once they've tried it, they've kind of adapted to it. And that's what we're hoping to do too with the Old Town facility, especially as the City Commission has identified, surplusing and selling vacant surface lots. We're familiar with other planned development downtown. So really getting employees used to the Park Once initiative, parking in the garage, and then walking or adding in micro-mobility or adding in other shelters or amenities for biking or busing is really going to be key as we complete the overall plan for downtown. So I think the first step is we've got to get people to become more familiar, whereas right now, they might be shy from trying something new. But I think that once they create new habits, the walking habit, the parking once, and getting to their destination, I think that they'll be more adaptive to those solutions.
Okay, and another question. For proposed parking validation program, would that come at any cost to the city and parking services, or would the employers or businesses be fully reimbursing?
So, yeah, we would follow the current model that we have with the Hardy parking garage and the Old Town garage, where we would work with the business, so we would do the administrative piece of tracking and billing, but the business would basically pay for the parking for their clients. And that would be at their discretion, if it's 100% or if it's $1 off or, whatever. We have some flexibility in how we can configure them, and so it's really on them as to what they would like to sign up for.
Well, as long as it's zeroing out on the city's balance sheets, I like that, especially since then it's up to that business for employee retention or attracting new customers, whether they want to, say, invest in a bike rack out front or invest in parking validation for how they can actually get people there.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation so far, and you've touched on this several times already, but it's the one thing I had highlighted with two colors on page 4, which was the seasonal conditions makes options like transit, biking, and walking from peripheral lots more acceptable to more commuters. it would be great if in a final draft of this, somehow there was some acknowledgement that we could make walking in non-summer months more acceptable by whatever it is. Like, what is it we need to do to make it more acceptable? Because what's the, essentially the flip side of what this sentence is. Because the sentence is true, people don't want to walk when it's not summer, or take transit or bike. So what could we do to make it so that the conditions are better? And not just take it as a given, like, oh, it's going to be bad and there's nothing we can do. Not that you're saying that, but we as a community, I think, can do better. Thanks.
All right, so then going on to the short-term 3 to 5 years, the next piece is really to develop a plan to support parking and structures or consolidated parking. Right now, we have a lot of surface parking. Again, those have been identified, and the goal to mark as surplus and potentially sell for redevelopment. So that redevelopment is going to potentially increase parking needs, transit needs, other micromobility needs. So really to develop that plan, begin supporting it. The other thing is, being ahead of the game. So there are many projects that have come before you. A way to kind of give a developer, what the plan is ahead of time. So that way they can adapt, be ready to answer your questions, and really work on that piece. So within the zoning plan, all the departments get a sign off. They check for, per space, per floor, per occupant. So the other thing is we focused on, giving breaks for bike racks to be included, or other biking parking. So to expand that more, transit passes being included for the parking minimums, as well as micromobility, maybe adding a mobility hub into their development. So just more ways to kind of expand beyond how we've thought in the past, and really gear towards moving individuals, not necessarily by vehicle, but by other modes going forward. So being able to give that again to the developers, so that way they are ready with their projects when they come forward. Within the piece that we've already touched on, that first and last mile. So again, reducing circulation, unnecessary searching for parking, or unnecessary additional admissions in the downtown area by having them go to designated locations, such as the parking structures. We've talked about the addition of a potential third facility on the west end. So we'd really have 3 kind of set up in a triangle. And so by meeting that piece as the parking location, those that need to get in and around downtown would have other modes, such as Beta, again, these mobility centers or hubs, adding scooters, adding shared bikes, other ways to get people around if they are choosing not to walk. Another recommendation that is expanded off of the seasonal rates is also looking at how we adjust meter times and also enforcement, especially as we look at changing those flex zones. Maybe we're loading in the hours of 8 to 10, pushing our meter enforcement time back from 8 to 10, and then extending our meter time from 6 to 8. So instead of it being an 8 to 6 meter time when people are loading up or bringing goods to and from their stores, maybe that's the time that we expand loading. And then when employees are coming in for their evening shift, we also know that we need to keep those spaces open for restaurants, that we extend the meter time. So that's another consideration that we'll be looking at in the 3 to 5 year mark. Lastly was a recommendation to update our residential parking program. So initially, when we did this program back in 2018, we did have 3 phases. The first phase was all in. We came back to you after that, did not go over so well, and had a tiered approach. So the first one was simply to acknowledge residential permits and provide passes for residents in the areas that have time-restricted parking. So we know that there's plenty of housing developments on the horizon. One consideration may need be that we need to work with the Planning Commission to consider overnight parking ordinance changes that would increase occupancy on street, as well as providing additional parking permits for employees who are working in these areas. And so that way the streets are utilized for both resident parking as well as meeting the needs of some employee parking. So again, these are just objectives that could be looked at in the next 3 to 5 years to further expand work that we've already done. Going into the future study, areas that we need additional consideration, again, these mobility hubs. So what does it look like as we're adding in additional density downtown, ways that we are increasing bike shelters, securing bike parking, adding micro-mobility stations, shared bike stations, loading and unloading zones. It could be Uber and Lyft drop-off zones. So considering mobility hubs, especially as we look at new developments or areas that there might be multiple developments going in certain sections. So that'll be a focus too on ways that we can include other infrastructure. And then also there was a recommendation before as it related to exploring public valet. So not specific to valet being tied to a restaurant, but valet tied to the whole district. So if you were coming downtown, we'll take the car up to the 4th floor. You can, walk from the ground floor throughout downtown, and then we bring the car back down. There have been examples throughout the states where this has been successful, and other areas where it has not been successful. So that's why it would take additional investigation to see if it's something that would benefit the residents and visitors of Traverse City. And then lastly, the LPR data collection, and that's really just taking the tools that we already have from our current software and purchasing a data package that makes it easier and more time effective to analyze some of the occupancy data. So those, again, are recommendations that are currently in this draft, and the consultants are looking for feedback. The DDA saw this presentation in September. We're looking to have a final draft in January and ready to be adopted. And then from there, the Parking Advisory Board would begin working on their updated 3-year work plan.
Any other? Yes, Mitch.
Yes, of the proposal to shift parking enforcement starting at 10 a.m., would that still include enforcement of the prohibition between 3 and 6 a.m.?
So right now, those are separate. So the 10 to 8 would be metered parking, and then the 3 to 6 is really overnight parking.
Mm-hmm.
So currently, there's no overnight parking at all in the DDA district, and that's mostly for snow removal. So we would be tackling those separately.
Okay. Just have had concerns about people that say might decide after a night at Dillinger's that they're taking a taxi home and forget to move their car from its on-street location, and then they come back the next morning, and even if they're there before that 10 a.m. time, they find that it's been ticketed already.
I've had that happen. I'd rather take the taxi home instead of driving. I paid the ticket happily. It was a better choice. So I admit it. We've all been in that situation once or twice somewhere. Okay. Go ahead. Anything else?
Ashley.
Where did I read or hear about a possible shuttle between parking garages? Or was that in here, or was that somewhere else?
There's information, I guess, on the street that we're putting together a
I know, like, where did
shuttle.
I hear that?
So it's possible that you might have read. I'm not sure. So we're still following that lead ourselves. It is something that we've been talking about internally. We started we started talking about it before the pandemic, actually, as a means to get people around. Again, that was when we were kind of splitting at the seams, and we knew we needed something. And then it kind of fell flat a little bit due to the pandemic, people working from home. But it has been brought up quite a bit in the past couple parking advisory board meetings. We're really looking at ways to incentivize employees to, park further away, leaving close parking spaces for customers. So we are looking into it. Part of the thing that, is a major consideration is a lot of these programs are not funded or operated by parking systems. They're really partnerships, mostly with transit authorities as well as tourism bureaus, and that's how they're funded. So a lot of additional study needs to go into that to make sure it's something that could be long-term funded.
I'll just take this opportunity to say I'm a fan of looking into the options of overnight parking, even if we have to consider like A or B night. After all the sidewalks were finished through the neighborhoods, there's been houses that it's very difficult to park completely in their driveway now because of the way their lot is shaped.
You mean overnight on-street parking?
Yeah,
Yeah.
my bad.
Yeah.
But just throughout the city.
When do you need any final comments from us? If we want, as we read through this, if you see anything else, you can send them to you.
Yeah, again, we're looking to have a final draft after the new year,
Okay.
so we can adopt it at the DDA board. They're meeting in January, probably around the 17th-ish.
Okay.
So after the first year, or by the first year would be great.
Okay. So if any of us have any other thoughts or comments, we ought to get them to you in the next couple of weeks.
Yes. That way, if you forget them, you can have time to
Or
remember them.
anybody else. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Electric shuttles.
Okay, I'm going to ask one last question because you didn't look this way. On page 12, the headings develop a plan for supporting future of consolidated parking. And it says, City Council has formally embraced a vision of a downtown parking supply that is largely consolidated in 3 parking structures. Are you sure? Like, have we really formally embraced, like, what does that mean that we've formally embraced a vision? We've talked about it, but I don't know that we've, like, had a vote on something that says this is what we intend to do.
We can modify, that verbiage. I think it was kind of perceived as though there was support for consolidating, given that there was the recommendation to consider Lot G, Lot O, and Lot X, was that the other lot, as potentially surplus in an effort to redevelop, knowing that those developments would likely have individuals that would park in consolidated parking. So we can change that verbiage so it's a little more flexible.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anyone from the public have anything? All right. Our second item deals with the ARPA funds. Come on, I gotta get my thing. Come on. There you go. As you remember at our, I think it was a study session a little while back. When was that? October 10th. We went through a dialogue of where we like to see some of the funds spent. Staff has put together those items. The only thing in here, we will have approximately, and he's planning to bring it to the City Commission next week for a vote so that we have these first 5 approved on the record. There's also items that are left to be considered at a future date. If we approve all 5 of these, then, that means we have a net balance of about $345,000 or $346,000. The only item that I have seen in there is that we have talked about a little bit is doing regarding the general neutral restrooms at the fire station. Ashley, you can help remind me, but I think we are concerned that it's going to be a little bit more than $150,000. So from the discussion we had last week, it's going to be closer to the $200,000 range, but we won't know that for sure until our next meeting sometime in December. So, but we also have $346,000 that's been uncommitted. If we need to move more there, we can come back and take that action also.
Yeah, I think we said up to, because there's some numbers we're just not sure about.
Yeah.
And we received a little more information this week, or last week, in our primary transport meeting, but we're still waiting for some more numbers to come back on that.
So just let you know that may be where some additional funds may be needed. So is there any other, this is from the notes we had, is there anything that was missed that you can tell at this point, knowing that we still going to have more talk? Okay.
Well, a couple things on here. My memory might be a little fuzzy on some of these related to these notes, but I thought like the Jubilee House Day Shelter was a larger amount than that.
Just 20. I requested 20,000 and that we were going to use it as a match with the tribal, with the tribal grants and others, but it was just 20.
That's what you originally requested, but we had a discussion on how that was only going to be for 1 year, but the program was for 2 years. And that we were going to bump that up so that it would be a successful program beyond 1 year.
Your notes may be better than mine, Dan. So.
I do recall that the specific point of making it for 2 years, my recollection is it was small dollar amounts compared to other things. I don't recall exactly how small, but I do know that there was a discussion about why don't we put or designate monies for 2 years. If we're doing it, let's do it for 2 years.
Right, so the 20.
Works for me. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And Honorable Mayor and City Commissioners, I tentatively will have a Housing Policy Fund a draft document for you at the December 5th meeting.
Okay.
The other item we had discussed was, that I don't see on here, was related to possibly incentivizing private property owners with their,
I thought that was maybe under the I&I implementation plan, or maybe that's not.
Yeah.
In my mind, it is, like,
Okay.
connected.
yeah, we had
Yeah,
lots of
okay.
discussion, and then we kind of went, it was a great
Sort of in the
discussion,
same
but I
bucket.
think it's, in my mind, it's part of that bucket.
Part of that.
And these are, well, that item is more broadly defined than gender-neutral restrooms at the fire stations in terms of what projects that actually goes towards and how that $250,000 gets allocated.
Well, it's also to pay for the consultant to help us to put something into place, which may take 30 or 40,000 for our plan, but that's how we work it. So, okay. So the only major, only change I see is that the change the Jubilee House from 20 to 40 for the 2 years, in which we're going to use for matching grants, and we may have to use it up, but we really want to use it as a matching grant first, and then we'll take it, and then we want to kind of leave 50,000 hanging, but like I said, we'll have money left over we haven't allocated at this point. So, any other questions? We just want to make sure we had it covered, and that, and we'll vote on these next week, so they are obligated. At least we're obligated, and then we got until 2026 to spend it. Okay, so there you go. So there you got it. So, and then as items come along, such as the Housing Policy Fund and other items, then we will consider those further. So, are we good? Okay. Anything else you need?
Nope, we'll make sure to get this first part of it in front of you by next week.
Thank you. I think this is close enough that if we want, we can have it on the consent counter, but we can always pull it if we want more discussion. So, but, we're just trying to get these 5 sets of funds obligated. So, thanks. All right. With that, I appreciate that. We're under public comment. First of all, I'm going to mention that I know in an update that Marty sent us, 4 Senate bills got passed last week by the House. Senate Bill 362, 364, 422, 432. 432, which dealt with pilots for housing, which is something I know we have had discussions here before. Did pass. I touched base with Marty this evening. They're going back for some reconciliation. hopefully that'll get resolved and it'll be back in front of the governor for signature. I did ask Marty if he could find a Cliff Notes, if there is such thing, from the MML for all 4 of these bills, so all of us will have at least a working understanding of what they may be. The devil will come into details when we're starting to try to implement, so I'm hoping we can do that. So, especially there's one of them was the neighborhood enterprise zones. I'm assuming that some changes got made to that law, so what did they do? So it'll be interesting. I'm glad to see that it's, I know Mr. Warner has been talking about the Senate Bill 432 for quite some time, so glad to see it's gotten there. The other one is that Saturday night, folks, it's going to be a little cold. You have to wear a thick coat, but Santa Claus is coming to town. So we like to see folks downtown about 5:30 could help sing around the tree that got placed today. We'll light the tree about 6 o'clock, and then at 6:30, the light parade. And for those of you who can join us, we'll be, as commissioners, city commission members, we're going to be walking the parade. So we'll be the last item in there because we're walking with Santa Claus. We want to make sure he gets to his designation, so we'll take it from there. So I hope everyone will be there. So is there any other comments from the city commission?
Honorable Mayor, there is one other piece of legislation that just was submitted out from the Senate.
Okay.
It's a piece of legislation that I know that I've been talking with Traverse Connect. Traverse Connect has been working and lobbying with a consortium of different agencies, and it was sponsored, I believe, by Senator Horn. And in essence, it's addressing with short-term rentals that an additional fund be created. And the original plan was to have some of this directed towards housing and affordable housing, workforce housing. But I've read the legislation as of today. I think it's still needs a lot of massaging. And I've spoken with our representatives out of Traverse Connect and communicated with, or am in communication with the MML, and think that there's some possibility here, but I believe that the legislation needs some work still.
Do you have a number on that bill?
880, Senate Bill 880. That being said, some of the individuals I'm speaking with do believe that this won't really come to discussion until the new legislature comes in, which means it'd have to be resubmitted, of course. But at least it's on the table.
Okay. With that, unless we want to stay, I will, any other public comment? You sure? How about you? Okay. Okay. With that, I'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Although with the time change.
2 minutes and 75 minutes.
Where are you going? Sounds amazing.
Aotearoa?
Both.